Everyone tells you the first $10,000 is the hardest. Save your first $10,000 and the rest gets easier. Push through the first $10,000 and momentum takes over. The first $10,000 is the milestone, the gate, the proof that you can do this. They are not wrong that it is hard. They are wrong about why. The first $10,000 is not hard because of the math. The math is straightforward. $275 a month for 3 years at a modest return gets you there. That is not complicated. That is not even particularly painful depending on your income. The math of the first $10,000 is achievable for more people than actually achieve it. What makes it hard is what the number cannot do yet, and nobody tells you that part. They tell you to reach it. They do not tell you what you will feel when you do. You will feel almost nothing. That is the lie. Not that $10,000 is difficult, that reaching it will feel like something has changed, that the momentum they promised will arrive, that the hardest part will be visibly behind you. You will hit $10,000 and the account will show the number and your life will look exactly the same. The rent is the same. The commute is the same. The Friday night calculation of whether you can afford the thing you want is the same. $10,000 in an index fund at 7% annual return produces $700 in a year before taxes. $700 is not momentum. $700 is a car repair. $700 is 2 months of groceries. $700 is real money that matters and is also not the feeling anyone described when they told you to save your first $10,000. This is where most people quietly stop. Not dramatically, not with a decision. They just stop adding to it with the same urgency they had before. The account sits. Life happens around it. The number stays roughly the same for months, sometimes years, because the psychological engine that drove the accumulation was running on the promise of a feeling that did not arrive on schedule. Understanding why that feeling didn't arrive is more important than anything else you will do with money in your 20s. Here's what is actually true about the first $10,000. It is not a destination. It is infrastructure. It is the foundation that has to exist before the building can go up. And foundations are not impressive. Nobody drives past a foundation and feels momentum. The foundation is the part that is entirely invisible once the building exists. You will not remember the first $10,000 when you have $200,000. You will not feel it as the thing that made the rest possible, even though it is exactly that. The first $10,000 is the most important money you will ever save, and it will never feel that way. The reason is compounding, and the reason compounding doesn't feel like anything yet is scale. At $10,000, compounding is happening. The math is running, the engine is on. But the output is small enough that your senses cannot register it as meaningful. $700 a year, $58 a month, $1.93 a day. The market is working for you, and the output is $1.93 a day, and your brain does not feel $1.93 a day as progress. This is not a failure of the system. This is the system working exactly as designed in a phase you have not yet grown into. The compounding curve is not a straight line. It is exponential, which means the early years are the flat part. The years where the math is real, but the results are invisible. The years where you are building the conditions for a future you cannot yet perceive. The curve bends later, dramatically. The $10,000 that grew to $10,700 in year 1 grows to something different in year 20. But year 20 requires that year 1 happened, and year 1 does not reward you for doing it correctly. Year 1 just keeps the option open. That is what the first $10,000 actually is. It is the keeping open of an option. It is the preservation of a future that does not yet exist. It is the most abstract possible return on the most concrete possible sacrifice. And the human brain is not built to feel that as motivation. There is a specific psychological trap that catches people here. It is worth naming precisely because naming it is the only way to see it before it catches you. It is called arrival fallacy. Arrival fallacy is the phenomenon where you anticipate that reaching a goal will produce a sustained emotional reward, and then the reward does not come, or comes briefly and fades faster than expected, and you are left with the goal achieved and the feeling absent and no clear reason to continue. Athletes experience it after championships. People experience it after promotions. And people building savings experience it at $10,000, at $25,000, at $50,000. Every milestone that was supposed to feel like something turns out to feel like a number on a screen, followed by a Tuesday that is indistinguishable from the Tuesday before it. The financial industry knows this and does not talk about it because their entire marketing infrastructure is built on milestone mythology. Save your first $10,000. Become a 401k millionaire. Reach financial independence. The milestones are real goals attached to false emotional promises. And when the emotion does not arrive, the system does not adjust its promise. It just adds another milestone further out and tells you that one will feel different. It will not feel different, not in the way you are imagining. What changes as the number grows is not the feeling, What changes is the math. And you have to develop a relationship with the math that is independent of how the math makes you feel. That relationship is the actual skill, not discipline, not willpower, not motivation. The ability to stay committed to a process that does not reward you emotionally for staying committed to it. That is what separates the people who reach $100,000 from the people who reach $10,000 and quietly plateau. There is a second trap that arrives slightly later and is less discussed than the first. It arrives around $6,000 or $7,000 when you are close enough to the target that the target feels real, but far enough that the remaining distance still requires months of patience. This is when the competing use for the money becomes loudest. The trip you have been postponing, the car that needs replacing, the opportunity that has a deadline attached to it. None of these are fabricated. They are real. The timing is genuinely bad. And the case for redirecting the money that is almost $10,000 into something immediate and tangible and present feels reasonable. This is not your responsibility. This is the present pulling against the future. And the present has a significant structural advantage. It is here. It is visible. It has a face and a feeling attached to it. The future at this stage is still a number on a projection calculator that you ran once and found encouraging and then closed. The people who get through this moment are not the ones with stronger willpower. They are the ones who built a structure that made the decision before the moment arrived. A separate account with a name on it. An automatic transfer that moved on a date that was not negotiable. A rule that the savings account was not a checking account with extra steps. The decision was made in a calm moment, and the structure executed it in the difficult one. Willpower was never in the room. This is the design principle behind every effective saving system. Remove the decision from the moment of temptation. Make the default behavior the behavior you want. Make the deviation from the plan require active effort rather than the plan itself. The plan should be the path of least resistance. Everything else should be the harder choice. Most people build it the other way. Spending is automatic. Saving requires a decision each month, which means saving requires motivation each month. And motivation is not a renewable resource on a reliable schedule. This is what the first $10,000 is actually teaching you, whether you recognize the lesson or not. It is teaching you whether you can operate without feedback. Every other system in your life gives you fee feedback. Work gives you a paycheck on a schedule. Exercise gives you physical changes you can see and feel within weeks. Learning a skill gives you measurable improvement you can track. The feedback loops are tight enough that the behavior feels connected to the reward. Investing at $10,000 gives you almost no feedback. The reward is not visible. The connection between the behavior today and the outcome in 20 years is so stretched across time that the brain cannot hold both ends of it simultaneously. You are asked to act now for a result that will arrive when you are a different person in a different life, facing different problems. And the bridge between here and there is not motivation. It is not discipline. It is a system that does not require you to feel like doing it. This is why automation is not a productivity tip for investors. It is a psychological necessity. The automatic transfer does not ask how you feel about investing this month. It does not check whether the market is up or down, or whether you had an expensive week. It executes. It moves the money. It keeps the system running through the months and years when nothing about the experience tells you to keep going. The people who build real wealth are not more motivated than the fine dollars. People who stop at $10,000, they are not more disciplined. They built a system that runs without motivation. That is the difference. That is the entire difference. Now here's the part that is harder to hear. The first $10,000 is the hardest not because of the money. It is the hardest because of the identity shift it requires and does not announce. You are not becoming someone with money. You are becoming someone who does not spend money they have. Those are not the same thing. And most people thought they were becoming the first one. They were becoming the second one. And the second one is harder. And the second one does not have a cultural script that makes it feel like a personality you want to inhabit. The person who does not spend money they have is not the person in the car commercials, is not the person in the travel content, is not the version of wealth that the culture rewards with attention and status. That person is invisible until they are not. Until their 50s, when the options they kept open start to close in ways that look like freedom. But the years between 22 and 45, when the not spending is happening, those years do not look like winning. They look like restraint. And restraint is not aspirational. Restraint does not get shared. Restraint is what you do when the thing you are building is too far away to photograph. This identity gap has a cost that does not appear in any financial projection. The cost is the sustained, low-grade friction of living in a culture that rewards visible consumption while you are quietly doing the opposite. Every social media feed is a highlight reel of spending. Every algorithm is calibrated to show you the version of life that costs more than the one you are living. The gap between what you are building and what you are being shown as desirable is not accidental. It is the design of systems that profit from the gap staying wide. Knowing this does not make it easier. It makes it legible. And legible is the first step toward manageable. There is one more thing worth saying about the first $10,000 that almost no one says. It takes longer than the calculator suggests. Not because the math is wrong, because life is not a calculator. The calculator assumes consistent contributions on a fixed schedule with no interruptions. Life provides the interruptions. The month the car needed work, the month the rent increased, the month the family situation required money you did not plan for, the month you were just tired and the transfer didn't happen, and you told yourself you'd double it next month, and you didn't. The average person saving their first $10,000 takes longer than the math projects. Not dramatically longer, but meaningfully longer. And the gap between projected timeline and actual timeline carries its own psychological weight. You thought you would be there by March. It is September. The account says $8,400. You have not failed. You are not behind in any meaningful sense, but it does not feel that way because the only timeline you have is the one you set when everything felt possible. Recalibrate the timeline without abandoning the direction. The direction is correct. The schedule was always an estimate. The estimate was always made by a version of you who had not yet lived the months between the plan and the present. $8,400 is not a failure. $8,400 is 8 months of something that compounds. $8,400 on its way to $10,000 is not a plateau. It is a position. It is infrastructure under construction. It is the flat part of the curve doing exactly what the flat part of the curve is supposed to do, which is exist quietly without rewarding you for noticing it. $10,000 is not the milestone. $10,000 is the proof of concept. It is the evidence that you can do the unsexy version of the thing long enough for it to matter. It is the part of the experiment where you find out whether you will continue an experiment that is not giving you results you can feel. Most people find out they will not because they are weak, because they were told the wrong story about what the experiment was for. The right story is this. The first $10,000 is not the hardest because the math is steep. It is the hardest because it asks you to believe in a process before the process has given day. Do you any evidence worth believing in? It asks you to act like someone you cannot yet see yourself becoming. It asks you to fund a future that does not feel real from here. And then it asks you to do it again next month and the month after. Not because it will feel different, because eventually, somewhere in the flat part of the curve, the scale tips. The $10,000 becomes $30,000. The $30,000 becomes $80,000. The returns stop being $1.93 a day and start being numbers your brain can register as meaningful. The feedback loop tightens, the motivation arrives. But it arrives after the system is already built, after the automatic transfer has been running long enough that stopping it would feel like the strange choice. The momentum they promised is real. It just comes later than they said, and for different reasons than they described. It is not emotional momentum. It is mathematical momentum. The curve bending, the compounding reaching a scale. Your senses can finally register, but you have to get through the years where it cannot be felt to reach the years where it can. The first $10,000 is not the hardest part because it is the biggest climb. It is the hardest part because you are climbing it without being able to see what you are climbing toward. Keep climbing. If this is the kind of honest accounting you are looking for, the rest of the channel goes the same place. No shortcuts, no promises, just what the numbers actually say and what they mean for the life you are building.